Good afternoon from Bonn, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I guess it is morning for some of you as well, so good morning to those of you joining us from that side of the world. My name is Arielle D Kovac, and I am Head of Communications here at ICLEI, and I am very excited to be here today with a couple of very special guests. So we're joined this afternoon by Gonzalo Munoz, who is the COP25 high-level champion. He's only going to be able to join us for a few minutes. I'm going to give a very abbreviated bio from him, although it could go on for many minutes here. Gonzalo has been at the forefront of environmental innovation in Chile for many years, having founded Triciclos in 2009. And he, as the COP25 high-level champion, was really key to mobilizing climate action across many different types of entities, cities, companies, investors, civil society. We know that he showed incredible leadership. We were talking this morning on the call with the COP26 high-level champion, Nigel Topping, that it was really amazing what Gonzalo was able to do in a very short amount of time. So we're excited to have him speaking with us today to tell us more about how the vision continues from the COP25 presidency on. I'll just turn it right over to you, Gonzalo, so we have the maximum. Oh, actually, sorry, no, Yunus is going to start us off with just a little basic introduction. That's right. Let me look at the agenda here, and then we'll get into Gonzalez's presentation. So Yunus, please.
Thank you, Arielle. I also don't want to keep our audience too long in terms of the opportunity to have insights of Gonzalo, but it may have been helpful as our audience is increasing in number with the participation. Although we are having this monthly webinars every time we have new colleagues joining us, I just wanted to give a brief background of how we reached to Paris Agreement and how we have done since then. In the sense that in fact the Paris Climate Agreement is the reason. Just a moment. The reason why Paris Climate Agreement is so important for us is that over the past 20 years of climate negotiations, one of the biggest concern we had was that there was no recognition of the role in the Paris Agreement. The document that was signed by heads of state, that there was a clear recognition of the importance of engagement of all levels of government. Therefore, from now on, for cities and regions, the implementation of Paris Agreement is not a voluntary initiative, but it's a duty, and we are part of the success story of the Paris Agreement. Therefore, we have to be much more engaged in terms of its implementation. Over these 20 years, we have developed our constituency as local governments and municipal authorities, the networks, but we have been part of the negotiations with the UNFCCC, and 2014 Climate Summit was instrumental to kick off this multi-stakeholder initiatives. Since Paris, of course, the moment we get to Paris, we didn't stop. Especially Marrakesh Partnership was a new element. The collaboration between the UN member states and the non-state actors was important. Talanoa dialogues was a momentous opportunity for us to have a discussion at the national level of how NDCs could be much better improved. 2018 Global Climate Action Summit was an important moment in terms of bringing the civil society on board, and 2019 UN Climate Action Summit, where actually I'm sure Gonzalo will talk about, because he was already part of the process, had also mobilized all our efforts. And all these process, in fact, none of them is happening in a daytime. So it's a cyclic process. It is a continuity of the leadership. So every year, the country who hosts politically define their political and technical leaders, and in that sense, since Paris Agreement was in force, we have both the champion, which is the action leader, which is Gonzalo Munoz in the case of Chile, and the president, which is the person who is leading the negotiations, in this case, the Minister of Environment of Chile, Carolina Schmidt. The same applies in the UK now. We have another team there. The one added, let's say, appointee is Mark Carney, in terms of his capacity as a finance advisor, because we know COP26 will be a huge topic on on finance. And in between, every year the negotiators meet in Bonn at the technical level meetings, and this year it's now scheduled in October. With this last slide, in fact, we would like to emphasize that last year, especially in 2019, we enjoyed a lot the focus of the COP25 presidency to have cities on board. Now the champion and the UK presidency also announced their new agenda. We're very happy that all these 5 priority areas are very close to our heart. And when we were in Madrid, together with the champion and together with the COP25 presidency, we announced our roadmap towards Glasgow under 6 themes, and we are feeling that these themes, the ambition and the sea vertical integration, finance, balance between mitigation adaptation, climate, and especially circular economy, which is a topic that Gonzalo literally have introduced to the UNFCCC negotiations, and of course nature, and expanding the global agenda towards other ministries like urbanization, culture, is something that we're proud that we have announced in Madrid with COP25 presidency. And since then, I'm very happy to announce that we have more than 19 partners who are now working with all together towards making the Glasgow COP as a multi-level action COP. With this, I'd like to now give the floor to Gonzalo without further ado, so that we hear his perspectives. And once again, we express our deepest gratitude for his leadership and clean, so warm, close collaboration with our constituency as well.
Well, thank you very much, dear Yunus. That was a really touching presentation due to the situation that we're going through. I'm as proud of what we have achieved in the past months as enthusiastic about what we can do in the future, recognizing that we are going through probably one of the toughest moments humanity have ever faced, and hopefully one of the toughest that we will ever face if we are capable of learning from this crisis. So first, I would like to thank you through this, of course, thank all of the local governments and municipal authorities that have been arranging the possibility of having a deep conversation on how are we going to move forward with this agenda. And of course, wanting to thank all of the organizations, organizers, and support of this meeting. We know that it would be, I would say, even absurd not to start by mentioning where are we now and how everything that is happening in the world connects to the agenda that we have been working for, probably you and some of the people here in the room longer than me. As you know, I joined this group of amazing people and wise people and organizations on climate action, I would say only 1 year ago. It was about 1 year ago when I joined the first meeting of the Marrakesh Partnership in Bonn. And as you were there, you know that my approach was from an outsider, quite naive in some ways, but probably bringing some of the innovation that this requires. I have to say that I've been very well surprised on the level of commitment, the level of capacity and experience that we have in such a room as the Marrakesh Partnership, or what the Marrakesh Partnership represents for the world, and at the same time, the need of doing things differently or giving different approaches. That has been part of what I've tried to do in the last year or so. In that sense, you might remember as well, or some of the people in the room might remember, that one of the elements that was evident for me, and yet it wasn't necessarily evident for the whole room because part of it has been evolving on time, was positioning science in the center and position the 1.5 degrees in the center. This was May 2019. We had the IPCC report on 1.5 degrees in October 2018. And for me, being an outsider, was quite surprising that maybe some of the parties, some of the constituencies were not feeling very comfortable on committing really strongly towards 1.5 degrees. And we are here for that. We're here for increasing the ambition. We're here for delivering action. We're here, therefore, to show evidence. And there's no way we can show evidence without considering science. And why am I referring to that? I'm referring, of course, due to our common experience and our common history, but at the same time, because in this right moment, we're crossing this crisis that is positioning science in a way that it has probably never been positioned in the past. And that is as well as a great opportunity. It's not only about positioning science and allowing science to be in the center, it's about showing the risk of not following science. It's about showing how even absurd it can be for a leader of any kind of organization in the world not to follow the indications of the science community, the scientific community. So then we have a big block that for all of us that have been working around climate action and that have been asking for global leaders to follow science, it seems to for me that this will be hopefully easier to follow that narrative. But it's not only about that narrative. There's another narrative. It's the narrative about empathy. It's about the narrative of all of the people around the world that are being suffering, or all of those that potentially can suffer something in which I personally can be related in terms of my actions and the consequences of my actions. And sometimes, how many times, this is related to somebody that I might never know, somebody that might be even living in an area that I will never even visit. That narrative is the same narrative for COVID than is the narrative for climate. We need to increase the level of empathy towards not only the other human beings, mostly to those that are more vulnerable. Mostly, in this case, to the elder people, to those that are suffering very concrete diseases that might be in a group of higher risk for suffering the consequences of COVID. Well, it's actually the same thing with climate. We need to be much more empathetic to all of those that are already suffering the consequences of the climate crisis. That should take us to another concept that has been positioning very rapidly, and I would say even surprisingly, the lack of resilience. Our systems, even many times, our governmental systems, not only at the national level, but many times at a local level, are suffering the lack of resilience. They were not prepared properly for the type of crisis that we are now suffering. Well, exactly the same thing for climate. We have to increase the level of resilience and adaptation. So at the end, it's totally related to our personal acts, what we can do as individuals. We have seen now through this crisis that definitely represents a possibility of impacting so many others. That level of interdependence that has been shown is the type of interdependence that, when you take it to a political level, is related to what you mentioned on bringing the ministerials, different ministerial or sector ministerials to work together. We need them. We need the ministers to work together. We need the local authorities to work together with the other ones. I mean, we are all living in such an interdependent world, and it's not only about, again, humans, it's about the well-being of the whole system. It's the way we interact and we relate to the environment, and how much the well-being of humans is absolutely based on the well-being of nature as a whole. So in that sense, as you know, we have the structure, the organizations that you have referred to, the Marrakesh Partnership, as an organization that was launched 5-6 years ago, is probably the best, the strongest platform in which all of the people that understand everything that we have been talking about and relate that to climate have an opportunity of collaborating. And we invite every single local government to connect to the Marrakesh Partnership and the coalitions that work there, because that is in the center not only of the climate action separately, that is the main connection to the role of the parties and the process. We need to strengthen that connection. We need to help the Marrakesh Partnership and those coalitions to continue being the structure, the platform that help the parties for them to increase their ambition, to get the evidence, to know what is really happening in the ground. The Marrakesh Partnership and all of our members are absolutely connected to acceleration of action, and nowadays to mostly increase ambition on climate action. As you mentioned, Yunus, in the last document of COP25, in 1CP25, for the first time, it was also mentioned the increase of ambition of one of the elements, or probably now I would say the main element that we require for non-state actors to help the role of the parties. Of course, again, now we have an element that is very strongly positioned in the center. It's about science. We need to strengthen the role of science, and now it's an opportunity for collaborating much more with others. In the legacy of COP25, what happened in Madrid, one of the main elements is the extension of that mandate that was created in Paris that you referred to. That was the first moment when non-state actors were mentioned as those that can deliver and must deliver concrete action for the fulfillment of the Paris Agreement. Well, that mandate that was supposed to end this year was extended last year in COP25 for another 5 years. What are then the parties telling us? They are telling us that, yes, they confirm that role from the local governments and for all of the non-party stakeholders, but they are relying on the role of the local governments to increase the level of action and the level of ambition. They are relying on us to deliver the evidence that they require. And that's absolutely based on the plan that we are developing with Nigel for 2020 and now for 2021, or until the moment that we have the certainty on when COP26 is going to be held. We are committed to increase the ambition. How? Mostly about one of the main tools that we delivered for COP25. There's the Climate Ambition Alliance. The Climate Ambition Alliance is an alliance of parties, sure, but also of non-party stakeholders that we prepared in the first time for the summit, the Secretary General Climate Summit in September last year, when we had 121 cities joining that alliance. But then we had one of the most brilliant increases in numbers to reach 398 cities in COP25. Thanks for all of the people that are in this room that joined. Well, we need much more. We have the commitment of many of you. We need to increase at least by 10. I'm sure that my friend and colleague Nigel mentioned this in his previous presentation. We need at least more than 4,000 cities to be committed to net zero by 2050. And by 2050 means this is a race to zero, right? If you can achieve net zero by 2025, then we will celebrate even much more, okay? 2050 is the last possible date. We need all of you. And it's not only about us here in this room, it's the parties need that, your citizens need that. All of your constituencies need this race to zero to be very, very active. Then, of course, we also building on the legacy of COP25 through the 1.5 degrees pathways. We develop a very concrete tool for the parties to know what can be done towards the achievement of that net zero and resilient world. And those pathways are now being worked in order to increase the role of science in the center, right? The scientific evidence for that to be the best possible pathway. And of course, as I am a champion coming from Latin America and the Caribbean, we need also to strengthen the role of the Latin American cities. We're working with Jordan Harris in order to bring more cities. We had a great commitment from the Argentinian cities back in COP25 in Madrid. Now we need much more. We need those cities to to join. We need Latin American and the Caribbean cities to be part of the alliance, to be part of this general commitment. We are working on involving those networks, hopefully through many events and dialogues that will be held during this year. I just wanted to finish about how much we have been noticing during the last conversations that we're having. Even the Petersburg Dialogue brought together some great actors around subnational governments to help the parties for their commitments or the commitment that can develop together through, for example, transport. We know that we're facing a great challenge by the potential stigmatization of the public transport. That should mean that people can be invited to cycle and walk more, not to go to their cars. We have, of course, the need of doing a better use of our energy. Some energy efficiency jobs can be developed quite fast and easy and connected at the same time to the requirements of not only green recovery, build back better, but also connected to the reduction of the local emissions that generate health and respiratory diseases. We have an opportunity with solar roofs. We have an opportunity with local food that can be developed while greening our cities. It's a lot about how cities can be much more connected to increasing the well-being of people while at the same time increasing the well-being of the planet and increasing the well-being of our economy and our society. I would stop here. I can speak hours to this group and this topic. I'm passionate about the work that you're doing, but mostly absolutely committed to following and strengthening our works on collaboration, and always thankful for the work that you're doing.
Great, thanks so much, Gonzalez. Gonzalo, sorry. I know you have to leave us now. Do you have time to do one question or?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
So I would actually invite then any questions from the audience. If you've got a question for Gonzalo before he has to head out. Otherwise, Yunus, I might ask you to pose a final question to Gonzalo. I'm not seeing any questions come through at the moment, so
maybe rather than a question, but again, it is never enough to express our solidarity and to celebrate this. I mean, you have been one of the hardest to prepare for a summit where your country was about to host, and in 1 month time you have to go to another continent, and I think this collaborative solidarity is also something that we could share with the COVID, that the better we can unite our forces, the better we can respond. And I think you made a perfect case of how this similarities in terms of solutions could be increasing our capacities and making ourselves more hopeful. So in that sense, you will also be recognized as the longest lasting champion because so we will not let you go, but for sure you have, even now today we are aware you are going in the UNFCCC business again, especially coming from an outsider and giving us a fresh momentum. It is really appreciated, Gonzalo. We really would like to thank you very much, and we are happy Ramiro and Jordan will continue maybe in the Q&A session. There will be more details to ask for them, but once again, thanks a lot, and we would look forward to continuing our joint journey together.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Yunus, Arielle, and all the people in the room. Thanks for the possibility of working together. Count on me. Thank you.
Arielle, I think there is several points. Maybe before going to Ramiro and Jordan, we can give a couple of more minutes. I mean, if it's up to you. Just maybe before, in that sense, Ramiro Fernandez is a long friend of us. Maybe I can provide some updates about his background. I mean, we were lucky to meet him in Lima on the way to COP20. He was a very close support to the Latin American COPs since then, and I think the Chilean championship and Chilean presidency also made a very wise move to bring him onto the process again, and Ramiro really played an instrumental role in terms of Climate Ambition Alliance. And next to him, over these years, these months in the past year, we enjoyed a lot with Jordan as the contact person or the focal point and within the presidency for cities and subnational action, and that greatly helped us in our success towards preparation in the deliverables in Madrid, and then still continuing both at the regional and global level. And I think this is also a very, very good example, because in the preparations we were experiencing that the UK presidency was also asking what are your best practice. We encourage them that to follow similar structures, and we are happy that Agathe is now seconded to the UK presidency's team, so that this learning and continuing to build it further is really proving to be successful. So we are very happy. Jordan and Ramiro is both with us, and they're ready to share their insight, I think. And now, Arielle, maybe you can take the floor about the inputs from the participants now.
Yeah, there are a couple questions, and Ramiro and Jordan, I'll sort of pose them, and maybe you can volunteer if you feel like you're in the better position to answer them. So the first is, what are the synergies to the green recovery efforts that are being made at the local, national, and regional levels that you're seeing from your positions?
Jordan, do you want to react first?
Sure, I can react initially. We know we've been hearing a lot about the very real synergies between the climate crisis and the challenges in the face of climate change for cities and the recovery, a green recovery post-COVID-19 crisis. So concretely, we've seen, for example, very recently published the C40 statement of principles on this issue, which is signed off on by a number of mayors across the world, including, I think, 9 mayors from Latin America, and among those from the metropolitan region of Santiago was one of the signatories of the statement of principles on how we cannot return to business as usual post-COVID-19. That as terrible as the sanitary crisis is, the health crisis is, it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn, as Gonzalo had mentioned, about listening to science and about following science to choose the right pathways towards recovery. But it's also an opportunity in order to take advantage of this real need that we see to remake our local systems based on circular economy, principles of sustainability, of nature-based solutions, and finding also the right ways to finance these activities in cities. Gonzalo mentioned specifically, right, the idea of climate solutions as also solutions towards general human well-being, and this idea of living well. So I think this balance between adaptation and mitigation is also now being mixed with a balance that's moving towards green solutions, also in the framework, right, of the Green New Deal that we're seeing coming out of Europe, and even some voices in the United States that are beginning to talk about this. So I think cities leading the way in that regard is something that we should definitely be looking to in this framework on the road to Glasgow.
Arielle, just to complement Jordan's comments, I think he framed very well the role of cities in this context and the recovery process. What we are seeing from the champions perspective, it is the two key elements that we are relating this. First, we think it is critical first to understand that the decisions that are being taken at this stage at the by national governments related to their recovery packages are probably relevant economic and climate decision that governments will take for the next decade. So the NDC enhancements, the long-term strategies that we aim to present under the Paris Agreement, they will be influenced heavily by these decisions. So it is critical that we ensure now that those decisions include climate components in those recovery packages in a very strong way. So from that, and the champions are welcoming and acknowledging all different constituencies of non-state actors that are coming publicly about this relevance on linking recovery with climate and the Paris Agreement. And we know some of the local governments constituencies has had already made public statements on that. I know the C40 is leading one. We also know asset owners are have public statements on this as well. Different business constituencies from France, Germany, and within the UN Global Compact are also coming with a very clear and strong voices that we need to relate climate with the recovery packages right now. And this should be reflected in the anti-disease enhancements and the long-term strategies that should be presented under UNFCCC. So we encourage and we invite all actors, non-state actors, to build up as sooner as possible public statements and to address the national governments, encouraging them to make these relations. This last week, it came an open letter from Patricia Espinosa and both champions to inviting people to, I'm not sure it's been public, sorry. We did work on a letter inviting those companies that are making their own public statements regarding recovery, inviting them to join the Climate Ambition Alliance. So that's something we could do as well within the other constituency and local governments. I think it would be very, very good if we can accelerate this, and this is something that should happen in the next 20, 30, 45 days, not more than that. So I would invite you to do
that. Maybe I would bring in a question from this morning that I thought was good, was about adaptation and how we bring that in to the messaging. I think the race to zero is, from a communications and kind of alignment perspective, really motivating and strong. How do we fit adaptation into that picture and into that message?
Sure.
Sure. Please go first.
Yeah, thanks, Rama. Yeah, that's an excellent question and an excellent issue, especially in the context of Latin American cities. We see that adaptation typically kind of takes the fore, maybe different from cities in other parts of the world where mitigation is a major concern. Not to say that mitigation is not a concern for Latin American cities; it still is a very important concern, especially for large cities. But we know that there is a special concern over issues of adaptation because of how vulnerable and exposed to different kinds of impacts, both of climate events as well as economic impacts as a result of climate change. And I think it's important to kind of keep this focus open. We know that the Climate Ambition Alliance is very focused on mitigation, on targets, carbon neutrality targets, and this is of course very important, and it has a linkage, as we mentioned before, with health issues, right? So as we clean up cities, we are also helping with air quality, which for a number of cities in Chile and in Latin America is also a very critical issue that is related to health and also to in a way to adaptation. But I think that there is a need to move forward, perhaps within the context also of work on nature-based solutions. We could also look at this linkage between the climate challenge and the biodiversity challenges that we're facing. I know that LGMA is very engaged with the biodiversity COPs, and that this is also a way that we can highlight the importance that cities integrate these kinds of considerations as far as understanding that cities are immersed within an ecosystem, that we can protect and also strengthen these kinds of services in order to improve the lives of people living within those cities through several different kinds of these kinds of solutions. I think it's a challenge that needs to be highlighted, and especially in the context of Latin America, we will be working with cities in order to encourage them to strengthen their adaptation planning along with their mitigation planning.
Yeah, within the climate champions team, we are working on two strengths relating to the role of adaptation in this context. First, and it's something we are still in progress, but we have the clear impression that the COVID context, and I think Gonzalo said something about it, the new COVID context and the new crisis, it puts the role of adaptation and resilience in a completely new, different level on how we're going to deal with this, acknowledging that it is the COVID crisis. The COVID crisis is a massive failure of risk management and how we consider and integrate risk within our societies, and this happens as well, or even more, with climate. The way we are considering and addressing the risk of climate impacts, it is absolutely undervalued. And third, and we too are aiming to put this in a completely different level on the road to COP26. For that, strengthening, as Gonzalo mentioned, linking the role of governments in science in decision making is critical. For those of you who are in Chile, you might have seen an open editorial that Gonzalo said it takes about 2 weeks ago about we need to include scientists in the board of directors of the companies. And I assume that applies as well for local governments. We do need to have scientists in the center of the decision making of the different institutions that we have to integrate climate in a much more stronger way. The other element, when we talk about risk management, there's a critical component related there to finance. And we are working with the private finance coalition. I can't remember the name right now. Sorry, I've got a sort of a lagoon. But we're working with them to ensure that the private finance constituencies, they will have by COP26 and hopefully earlier at this stage, a clear mechanism, a clear tool, and a clear commitment to integrate the risk of climate within every decision making on the finance component that they do. So, and this is critical for cities related to, for example, infrastructure projects, and how they will be integrating this, and the pros and cons, the benefits and the pros and the benefits and cons on not integrating the climate risk for the long term. And we are working with them on this stage. So we expect this to happen. And finally, as Jordan mentioned, we expect to reinforce new level of outcomes within nature-based solutions. You know, I'm quite sure it was mentioned this morning, but Gonzalo, I think, mentioned it there, and I'm sure Agatha is that as well. We are working with the Climate Champions team on 10 key points on sectorial system transformations, and within many of them, we have this co-benefit approach on mitigation and adaptation as well. And those are the areas we expect to make a game changer on resilience and adaptation on 2020 and on the road to Glasgow.
Great, and I think Yunus had something to add.
Thanks, Arielle. Just to complement, because I see a number of participants in the audience, even though they haven't raised their hands. I see Kobe Brandt from our ICLEI's Africa Secretary leading our work in the biodiversity. I see Manuel Pulgar Vidal, the COP20 president, and the current leader of WWF, who has a lot to share, and we have enjoyed it with him, both in the launch of our roadmap towards Glasgow, but especially on the nature-based solutions. So I just want to come back to this discussion that the debate that COVID, and in the sense that the postponement of COP, and that the superior nature, and that this health and resilience is really a golden opportunity for us to make the best use of, as Ramiro mentioned, the next couple of weeks and months, so that we start to prepare our documents and then make sure that the new plans are much more climate friendly and addressing the emergency of our planetary health and also human health. So in that sense, just to recall, in the next couple of days, there will be moments where there will be, for example, International Day of Biodiversity, and especially next month, the World Environment Day, where Climate Ambition Alliance will also renew its new campaigns. Nigel mentioned it. Maybe Ramiro can come back again. But it will also be a delayed day of celebration with UN Environment on Nature, where cities will also be a hot, let's say, component. And on the 17th of June, on the World Desertification Day, we would like to have our webinar, which with effect focus on the Edinburgh process, which is the biodiversity negotiations. And in fact, it's another fantastic opportunity because the COP being hosted in Glasgow, Edinburgh, the Scotland government is leading the biodiversity process, and the COP26 UK presidency putting nature-based solutions as one of their priorities are all making the stars aligning, and it's just us to put those into the same package, which is a new NDC for sure has to be presented with a much more bolder commitment. And finally, there was again in the Petersburg Climate Dialogue that Gonzalo mentioned. Those who have been following, it may be interesting to recall, just a couple of weeks before, Japan has presented their newest NDC, the second NDC, which was not that much higher in ambition, although we have more than 50 Japanese cities in the Climate Ambition Alliance. But on the day of the Petersburg Climate Dialogue, the Minister of Japan has committed that there will be a third NDC from Japan, which will be much more ambitious and much more robust before COP. So these are the moments to give us the hope that the process is just getting a new momentum, and we should just use this opportunity and make more use of this milestone. So I just wanted to address this, but in the Q&A session, maybe from the participants, there may be some in the contributions as well.
Let's see, I'm not seeing any right now, Yunus.
Arielle, do you want me to answer Yunus' request about the next steps of the Climate Ambition Alliance and how we're moving
that would be
in that?
great.
Absolutely happy to do so. As Gonzalo mentioned, the Climate Ambition Alliance that came out from the UN Climate Summit and got a substantial increase for COP25. We're still working on it for this year on this view and strategy on the race to zero. And this race to zero, the idea is to get net zero as fast as possible, as soon as possible. And we are launching the campaign on the 5th of June, on Earth Day, with a multi-actor event. And the idea will be to set the basis for what we expect to have this substantial increase in the years to come. So that's the plan for the new phase of the Race to Zero campaign. And I just want to connect this with Yunus' reaction on the relation with the Paris Agreement and NDCs and the new context we are. Our expectation is that we can really make a turning point on the reach Glasgow in a completely different stage on how we are addressing these systemic transformations that we are needed, and how the NDCs and the mechanisms of the Paris Agreement are just a reflection of a much broader systemic transformation that we're going to be moving forward. And having my former boss, COP20 president, here on the webinar, I have to recognize that this is very much related with his view and his role as one of the fathers of the action agenda from Lima to Paris, and keep working today. So We are working on this direction. We're really absolutely convinced that there is no way of going back to the business as usual context as we had before the coronavirus crisis, and that we should make COP26 as the critical turning point on how we are addressing climate and how we are finally reducing our emissions on the way forward and engaging on resilience, the same level of ambition.
If I could jump in really quick, just to complement, just to mention that from the Latin American perspective, we're also very aware that it's important to kind of make these to make significant and symbolic actions and gestures this year in the absence, right, or in the context of the postponement of the COP, and the kind of lapse or postponement of several significant events and activities that usually kind of provide a pathway forward or a series of landmark events throughout the year to keep the energy up. So we're in discussions now in order to develop a process similar to what occurred last year on a regional level in Latin America, where we used various different events throughout the year organized by the various local government networks that are active in the region in order to form a collaborative process that eventually ended in the presentation of a regional action strategy for Latin America during the COP25. So we've been working together with several partners, including ICLEI in the region, the Global Covenant of Mayors in the region, C40, the CC35 network, and other partners such as ECLAC, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and the European Union, in order to formulate a process that will allow us to kind of carry on this momentum, to kind of follow up on this action agenda, and are planning an event in Santiago towards the end of the year that would combine at least 3 different events, including the Cities Week that is usually organized by ECLAC, with a local governments forum that we're organizing as the COP25 presidency with the support of the European Union, and a hemispheric mayor summit that's being organized by the CC35 network with all of the mayors of Latin American capital cities. So this is a way that we hope to kind of keep the momentum up on a regional level, and would encourage also other regions to maybe try and foment these kinds of activities that would allow us to kind of mark the way and not lose momentum, as Ramiro said, so that we can get to the COP26 with this high level of energy and ambition.
Great, thanks for that, Jordan. I wanted to invite Veronica Arias from CC35 to come off of mute for a moment. And Veronica has a question, but of course we would love to hear from you, Veronica, about the Latin American process from your perspective as well.
Thank you, Arielle. Thank you, Yunus and Ramiro, Jordan, for your inputs. I was wondering if you guys have a knowledge of any initiative as the Green Deal in Europe, a post-COVID Green Deal in other regions than Europe. I was thinking and talking with other colleagues if our processes, especially regionally, can be supportive to this platform, and we will come with a Green Deal for Latin America, for example, or for Africa or for Asia. So everybody should have a Green Deal post-COVID, you know. And just taking advantage of what Jordan has mentioned, we as CC35 with other organizations, one of those are ICLEI, CEPAL, we're working with Global Covenant Majors, WWF, etc., that they are supporting the Hemisphere Cumbre of Alianza, Mayors for Climate, that I mentioned last webinar. That's a very huge initiative of having all the subnationals cities commit a binding commitment by legislation, passing legislation to commit for the year 2050 to have zero emissions. So, for example, this would be a really good initiative, but if we have it within a context of a Green Deal, would be more powerful, maybe.
Great, thanks. I also want to invite Manuel Pulgar Vidal, COP20 president, also to come off mute. 1 second. Manuel, there's been furious chat here amongst the panelists that we really want to hear your perspective on this as well. So the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much, Arielle, and hello, Yunus, Ramiro, and Jordan. Sorry for that. So yeah, let me bring some suggestion to this discussion. You know that I have just finished a good discussion about the action agenda. And there was a very good question, how to measure success of the action agenda. No, that I think it is an important topic to be discussed here, because how much the action agenda can contribute to the climate talk, to the climate debate, and also to the formal peace that it is the COP26. And as part of the answer, what I did was to think that we should measure success in different fronts. So success for the action agenda has 3 phases. The first one, it is the political measure of success. We are in a time in which the COP, it should be the time in which we could recover hope. Because what we have lost in this formal debate, it is the hope. And in that sense, I think that the action agenda can contribute by showing case, but also by encouraging to recreate, to recover that sense of hope. But on the other hand, when we think about a political measure of success, I think that what we should do it is to have parties recognize the action agenda as a key element. Because until now, there is a bit of divorce in between. No? Unfortunately, the action agenda can show trajectory, but in the formal piece, so in the COPs, we are not showing trajectory. And that is why we are pushing the idea of NDCs and those kind of things. So that is the first measure of success, the political one. The second one, it is the technical measure of success. And again, it is related to trajectory. It is interesting because we are in a dilemma in which in the action agenda, there is a clear trajectory that we don't have in the formal one. But that trajectory of the action agenda, it is not helping to recover hope in the political side. So how much can we do that? How much by having more actors, and that is why it is good what the champions are working on, to bring more actors, more actions, more new and strongest target. It is good, but how can we move that trajectory into the trajectory that the world needs to achieve? Because if not, the only thing that we are listening every time by journalists, it is disappointing, we are not in trajectory, we are failing, etc. And we do need to change that narrative. And in that sense, that trajectory that it is a technical measure of success by the action agenda, it could be useful. And the third measure of success, it is about the institutional measure of success. So what I'm trying to say is what we do need, it is to get legitimacy of the action agenda and also the champions. Why? Because when we think about the action agenda, we are talking about a broader concept, a really huge concept, in which the Marrakesh Partnership and the champions, it is just a piece of that. But on the other hand, we have different groups, we have different actors, but by leaning in the champions and by having them getting legitimacy to cover in some way the broader action agenda, we can create that strong link in between the formal process and the non-formal process. And also that would be a good way to cover the gap that means the current COPs, because I think that one of the most clearest statement in the former COP, the COP25, it was we hadn't had enough things to be discussed or negotiating. And that is happening with the process. The negotiators don't have too much to address in some way. So how can we cover that gap by bringing the action agenda And by building the legitimacy of the champions, it is really good. So let me finish by saying some things. For me, also what we should do it is to switch the concept of champions and the action agenda just to report and to showcase to encourage. That is really important. So now it is not about a yearbook, because the yearbook it is just to report what we have already done. It is to encourage. And in that sense, we have learned a lot on how should we act when we are facing an emergency. That is my first idea. The second one, role of the current champions for the future, it is to integrate. And that is why it is also important to use nature-based solutions to integrate climate with nature, with development. We are in a time in which that is a must. We have to integrate the concept, also as a way to recover hope in the people. The third role, it is to scale up. So we started all this process of the action agenda in 2014 with the Lima Paris Action Agenda, and after that the Marrakesh Partnership, and the idea of the champions and the yearbook and all those and events and all those kind of things. Now we do need to scale up this agenda and switching into a systemic transformation agenda, that it is more integrated, that it has more clear target for each one of the sector, that it could have more strong science-based targets and all those kind of things. So how can we think in this systemic transformation? And the fourth role, it is to build a bottom-up process. Because in some way, what it is happening, it is that in 6 years since the beginning of the action agenda, we are still mostly working in the global arena, but we don't have the same in the domestic level. So unfortunately, in many countries, we haven't been able to create that bottom up to bring the non-state actors into the table, to have them helping the new phase of the NDC. And to do that, what we do need it is to go to use the Paris Agreement as a platform, but to go beyond the Paris Agreement. So what I am trying to say it is, what we do need it is to convince the business sector, the non-state actors in our countries by saying, look, friends, it is the economy. The economy has started to change. It is not an agreement. It is about the economy and the survival of your company and the survival of your economy as a country or as a province or as a region. So it is clear that the new economy based on the climate consideration is going to reject products with too much carbon. It is clear that the new economy is going to be more strict in relation to the climate responsibility. So we do need to recreate that narrative in the domestic level to encourage the non-state actors to be more close to the process. And with that, I am sure that we are going to be, or to have more success in developing the new phase of the NDCs with more ambition and with more clear targets. So those are some suggestions that I hope can contribute to this discussion. And thank you again, Arielle, to open the mic, and to you, friends, to give me this opportunity.
Great, thank you so much, Manuel. It's always really interesting to hear your perspective, and I do want to be mindful of time here, so we are at the end of our time together. So if I can just ask our panelists, maybe you have one final sort of either reaction to what Manuel was talking about, or a summary of where you'd like to sort of leave things until the next time we're together. Maybe we'll start with Jordan.
Sure, just very briefly, I just wanted to pick up on something that I think Ramiro has mentioned, and I think also speaks to what Manuel was saying as well, is just the importance of the long-term strategies. We're at a point where many countries are in process, including Chile, and I think the integration of non-state actors, and especially local governments and cities, in these processes for the development of the long-term strategies, as well as taking advantage of the processes so that cities are able to integrate a long-term perspective into their own planning and thinking, is something that we should think about and look forward to maybe taking a kind of stock take at COP26 as far as progress in that regard.
Great, Ramiro.
Very briefly, I think it's been a very good webinar. Thank you very much for inviting us. And just to reinforce the critical moment that we are really looking forward to see the engagement of all of you on the road to Glasgow, particularly under the Climate Ambition Alliance. At least we've got almost 400 cities today So we expect to get to 4 southern cities by Glasgow, and without you, we were not going to be able to make it by any way. So really looking forward for your engagement.
Great,
Maybe
Yunus, finish this off. Yeah.
yes. First of all, thanks for all the participants, but of course, a big thank to Chilean presidency and Chilean champions and the team throughout the year. I think Manuel was referring to the hope, and last year you really were the most committed and the safeguarding, let's say, the destination that we could rely on in terms of hope. And then that I want to connect for this year. I think let's remember there are some interesting things that for the first time in the history emissions are decreasing. For the first time we have clean air in our cities, and that is very likely that is like a golden opportunity, that this is the moment to have our NDCs rewritten, literally rewritten, refreshed, and giving this, if we can beat Corona, if we can make this success story that we can recover from Corona, that is an opportunity for us that we can also deal with other challenges as well. So let's hope 5th of June is key. We will be all joining. There will be several events. Stay tuned. There will be updates from our side, and there will be several webinars. On the 28th of May, there will be Ministers Mayors Dialogue as well. On the 17th of June will be another round, and hopefully in Daring Cities in October, we will also rediscuss and come back with our more consolidated responses. And in between, we'll continue to have our monthly webinars. Thanks a lot for all your participation.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thanks. Cheers. Bye bye.